Hey, it's Kia. It's easy to feel overwhelmed by your finances. How we feel about our money can make a huge difference in how we manage it. So, we've got a financial wellbeing expert to tell us how we can improve ours. Welcome to another episode of A Little Bit Richer, brought to you by my friends at Legal & General. Today we have Clare Seal in the building. Now, Clare's story is so inspiring, so to give you some of the highlights, Clare struggled with a lot of personal debts, but she had the idea to create an Instagram account at My Frugal Year to hold herself accountable. She then rebuilt her relationship with money, and she now helps others do exactly the same. She has grown her platform massively, gathering an audience of nearly 120,000 followers along the way. Clare is certified as a financial coach and is currently studying for a diploma in financial planning. She's also the author of Real Life Money and 5 Steps to Financial Wellbeing, so there's literally no one better to talk to today about money. Welcome, Clare.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are incredible, and I've been so excited to have this conversation with you, not just because we know each other, but because you are a beacon when it comes to financial well-being and getting your money straight. So before we get too deep into it, let's start off and talk about the emotional side of money, because this is an important part about money, but is often overlooked. So I want to ask you, how does our relationship with money actually impact how we view money, and why is it so important to build a relationship with money?
Yeah, so I think there's this real symbiotic relationship between money and how we feel. Spending, saving, it's all really emotional. It's behaviour. It isn't sort of some magical system that we all download at birth. So, there's this huge interplay, I think, between how we feel and how we spend, how we think about money. And it's really, really shaped by our experiences growing up. I trained to be a financial coach with a wonderful woman called Simone Gnesson. And she likes to talk about your map of the world when it comes to money. So we're all going to have different approaches to money and different relationships with money according to our map of the world. And that's going to be things like what our parents taught us, both what they taught us actively and what they taught us passively in how they behaved around money, how much money we had growing up, how we started our financial lives, when we started them, when we started work, all of that stuff. It's all really tied up. And I think the big problem with that is that most of us are not really aware of that. And quite often we only become aware of it when there's a problem that we need to face. And that was certainly the case with me.
It's so key to actually understand how you learnt about money. And I was fortunate enough that my parents had a good relationship with money. So that was passed down to me. But there were some things that I did see at home. And I guess things that you said you subconsciously take in. So how does the way that we were taught money as young children influence the way that we handle money and use money growing up?
So I think it's really, really interesting. It's like almost anything about the way that you were raised. I think it quite often, the way that your parents do things will send you in either one direction or the other. So sometimes you will copy their behaviour exactly, or sometimes you will go running in the opposite direction. And so for me, it was slightly different. My parents got divorced when I was very young, and I grew up between two households with almost sort of diametrically opposing attitudes to money and approaches to money. So my mother is incredibly generous, very spendy. Christmases used to be amazing, insane sort of piles of really carefully thought out presents. And that was one of the ways that she really expressed love and care and thoughtfulness. My dad's household, it wasn't that it was less loving or less caring, but there was less focus on the material. It was more about activities. My dad had grown up with almost nothing, and he was naturally really frugal. He really didn't need very much to be happy. And so my whole adult life has been spent almost sort of springing back and forth between these two things. And I will have long periods where I feel content and sort of in control, and then I will have these periods where I feel like I want to spend all my money and I want to be able to give everyone else exactly what they want and also get a little bit of what I want as well. And I think finding the balance has been quite tricky for me. But and I think it's a really good idea if you've hit some kind of wall, whether that is, you're spending above your means and money is a massive source of anxiety for that reason, or whether it's because you're working really hard and you're saving really well, but you can't enjoy any of your money. You can't bring yourself to spend any of it, which is an issue for a lot of people. I think sometimes going back a little bit and thinking about where that might have come from is a really good starting point to resolving it.
And siblings have different reactions to how your parents view money and spend money as well.
Yeah, it's really funny, isn't it? Like that you can grow up in the same household and have a really different perception of how things are. You could take a household where the parents are very, very successful with money, and you might have a sibling where that really motivates them and they go on to be really successful. You might have a sibling that really rests on their laurels and doesn't feel like they need to be self-motivated because they're potentially relying on family wealth. And you could have a sibling, and I think this is potentially the most common reaction, where it instills in them a bit of anxiety about actually measuring up to their parents' success. And I've definitely spoken to people where that's the case, and they're saying things like, oh, my dad retired at 40. How am I going to do that? Because I'm just in this job where I'm earning like quite an average wage.
Absolutely. I think my brother and I couldn't be more different. So yes, I agree. Hearing your upbringing and your story and how that influences your current day perception and how you view money is amazing to hear, because there are people who believe that they're just inherently bad with money, and they believe this is just me. I was born this way. I've always been this way. I've always been bad with money. And I think when you sit down and you actually unpick how money was portrayed to you when you were younger, how you viewed it, and look at your present day, you will see some synergies and you will understand and say, actually, maybe I'm not bad with money. Maybe it's just how I was shown money, and now it's just working to change that, which is why it's great that we are talking about this today, because the emotional side is actually very important when it comes to managing money. Spending and borrowing money can often make us feel a range of different emotions, some really good and some maybe not so good. So can you talk a bit more about the feelings and recognizing and potentially changing any behaviours that might become a concern?
Yeah, so I think that pattern of spending, and quite often it's like overspending. So whether that means like you're actually spending above your means, or whether it means that you're spending right up to your means, so you can't actually do anything purposeful with the rest of it, put it towards your future or hit any goals. There's such like a range of emotions tied up with that, and everyone's going to have different emotional triggers when it comes to spending. Some people will spend to cheer themselves up. Quite often people, and this really applies to me, quite often what people are trying to buy isn't like the stuff itself. They're trying to buy a solution to a problem. And I would just out and out say that, like, if that's something you do, that's not your fault, because that is the way that we're marketed to. The whole principle of marketing is you don't sell people a product, you sell them a solution to a problem. And so that's what most of us are trying to do. I've spoken to people on maternity leave where all of a sudden your identity has changed so much and you feel like you have less purpose if you've been used to working in a job that was part of your identity, and spending money and buying these solutions is a way for you to feel productive. So there's this whole array of emotions, and sometimes people love to spend money when they're on like a real high, right? Because it enhances the high. So if you're out like with your friends and really enjoying yourself, and there's like that sort of, it doesn't matter, I'll deal with it tomorrow because I want this feeling to continue. And I think the really important thing is just, if you've had one of those real like splurges or sprees, and then you have the come down afterwards where you're feeling that buyer's remorse, you've got sort of real like anxiety, but in like a financial sense, the really important thing to do is to try and like give yourself a bit of compassion, because these things do happen, but also just try and sort of sift through the feelings and the emotions that led to this point and see if there's a way that you can proof yourself against them in the future. But it is really difficult. Our emotions impact our behaviour, and our behaviour has this material impact on our lives, and that goes for everything, not just money.
I agree. Our emotions are really behind a lot of different things, and we can highlight it when it comes to fitness, if you have like a motivation or you're really motivated, or eating. But for some reason, when it comes to money, we almost just think that there's inherently I'm just bad, as opposed to maybe I wasn't feeling great this day, so I spent a lot. Or do you know what? I had an amazing day, so I went and I just took out money, or I spent.
So many people are really stuck in these patterns of behaviour. And like you said, it mirrors so many other things like eating, exercise, drinking alcohol, a lot of these things that are coping mechanisms for dealing with strong feelings. Sometimes the alternative is to try and deal with the feelings themselves and face them head on. And that's a really, really hard thing to do. But I would also say, give yourself some compassion. We all look to external sources of pleasure or of comfort when we're dealing with difficult internal feelings. And the key is, if you are going to have a crutch, try and make it something that's healthy. If you're needing those crutches all the time, it's a really good idea to maybe like look internally and deal with some of those feelings head on. So I think the really key thing to remember, and something to potentially like repeat to yourself, I'm not like super woo-woo, but I do believe in the power of affirmations. Something that I have to say to myself quite often, and I really recommend like repeating to yourself, is that all of us are worth so much more than what we earn, what we own, and what we owe. That's such a small part of your life and what you're worth. They're all important in their own way, but they're not the be-all and end-all. So repeating that to yourself is a really good way to just put it into context and try and instill in yourself that sense of self-worth that's a bit more unshakable.
Claire, you've been very transparent online, and this is why I love your platform. But one part of it is your ADHD diagnosis and how this has influenced your behaviour with money. So can you talk to us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was diagnosed really late. I'm 35 now. I was diagnosed when I was 32. So it's like someone putting like a different pair of glasses on you and suddenly everything makes sense and you can see all the little details that you couldn't see before. I think I had carried so much shame with me about all of the mistakes that I had made with money, things like impulse spending, wasting money on like really fleeting hobbies, all of this stuff that comprises what we kind of call the ADHD tax. So the ways in which it is so much more expensive to be neurodivergent. Things like parking fines, library fines, missed payments, impacting your credit score, extra bank charges. And I think the more of that stuff you carry with you, the less confident you feel about your ability to actually be successful and thrive financially. But I think having the diagnosis and seeing how, according to science, all of those things are a risk when you have a brain that works slightly differently. So it has really changed my perception. I have so much more compassion for sort of 20-year-old Claire, which is where all of this started.
Speaking about neurodivergence is so important because had you had known that, maybe you would have factored in different things. There may be things that operate differently with you, or the way that you see things is slightly different. So you just have to just amend that to work best for you.
Yeah, because quite often that like I'm bad with money mindset is just a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you can try to break that down, it gives you a real opportunity to work on a system that actually works for you and to maybe develop a bit more confidence. Because actually confidence is really, really important when you're talking about managing your money well, growing a bit of wealth, even things like negotiating at work, like actually making more money. It's like a real important brick in the foundations of a good relationship with money.
Confidence is so important. And I think building up confidence takes small steps. So I want to ask you, what small steps can we take to make us feel better about how we manage our money?
So I think the first thing that I would always say to anyone is have an honest look at the state of the nation as it is. So get all of your ducks out. Doesn't matter if they're in a row already. They might be in different rooms. Some of them might be in different postcodes. Just find where they all are and then you can try and sort of coax them back into line. So that's the first step. Arm yourself with all of the information. It's really hard to be scared of things that are right in front of you. If there's a bit in the shadows, they're much more scary. So I would say that's step one. Second step, look at where the gaps in your actual knowledge are. So, you've got this situation, you might actually not know how to move forward from it. We're not given like a formal finance education, which is a travesty and something that I'm really hoping will change in the coming years. But if there are gaps in your knowledge, look for ways to fill them. Definitely don't only look on TikTok. There are loads of really great legit sources. There's lots and lots of places where you can look for that financial education, listening to podcasts like this, obviously, as well. And then I suppose a third tip would be find someone to talk to about this stuff. Find someone who's going to listen to you, not judge you, but hold you accountable. And also just confiding in someone and offloading and talking about these things is always helpful.
Amazing. Claire, you have shared so much information when it comes to financial well-being. Like I said, we don't really touch on it a lot. We just talk about how you should manage your money and not perhaps why we do it, the emotional side of it. So this has been so insightful. So to round up the episode, I want to ask you, what are your top 3 tips for maintaining a good relationship with money?
So I would say, as tempting as it is, don't let your head slowly bury itself in the sand. One of the things that I do is I just get my balances delivered to me every day. So I don't have to do anything. It's very hands off, but it keeps me aware, keeps me conscious. I would say automate as much as you possibly can. So automate your savings, pay yourself first, whether you're setting up like a standing order or whether you're using an auto saving app, all of these different things that you want to do to work towards your goals. Automate them as much as possible. Takes a lot off your mental load, and also it's ticking away in the background while you're concentrating on other things. And a third tip I would say is do a quarterly review. If you're kind of at the point where you're having to dig out all this information and do a big state of the nation and maybe things have gone a bit haywire, you can really avoid that by just every quarter put a note in your diary and just look at the lay of the land, compare it to your financial goals, see if there are any tweaks that you need to make. So I think the theme of all 3 of those things really are keep things going rather than letting them go and then having to go back and pick them up again.
Absolutely. Claire, this has been so insightful. And I think I'm going to go home and reflect on how I perceive money and kind of just reevaluate how money was shown to me at home and what that has manifested itself into today. But this has been such a great conversation. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's been great.
Next time, we'll help you develop your career with lots of helpful ways you can move up that ladder with Legal & General's Sarah Evans. I'd love it if you could review the podcast, spread the word, and help others get a little bit richer too. Keep up with the show on TikTok and Instagram at Legal & General. Thank you for listening. See you soon.